So there was no script when I came on,
Yeah.
we developed it, and I think anyone who does...
That's exciting.
Anyone who does a film like this, or anyone who does a comic book run and wants to, reinvent these characters for that, whatever that new issue is, has to think about it from their own perspective. I think you have to bring your own specific experience to it. And I thought about my marriage, I thought about my daughter, I thought about her birth, I thought about all the parental anxiety I had and the nerves I had and the genetic testing my wife and I did, and then I thought, oh God, well, what if I had cosmic radiation and I had been changed by a cosmic storm? How would I feel about having a child? And would I be concerned about whether it was going to be healthy and all of those things? And then if I were incredibly famous living in a glass building and everyone was looking at me as the symbol of my time, should I have a child and bring them into it? So I wanted to think about it from their perspective. What would a child do to this particular family? Because they reflect all of us. I think that's the power of the Fantastic Four. The reason why they've been such a bold and original idea since they were created is that they are a real family, and they are not a found family like Star Trek, like Avengers, like X-Men. They're a real family dealing with real stuff. And having a child, raising a child, is the most mysterious journey into the fantastic any of us can do.
So, you're Matt Shakman.
I am indeed.
Welcome to Film Stories, Matt Shakman.
Thank you. It's good to be
something I'm
here.
sure you read and listen to religiously.
Yes.
Thank you very much. All right. So, after all I've seen, just for those watching, listening, all I've seen of your film so far is about 24 minutes.
Great.
Which they showed us.
Great.
So it's quite hard to have any kind of view on 24 minutes. So it means I wanted to ask you about June the 14th, 1990.
Okay.
Because if I'm getting this right, you would have come of age of film, appreciating you've got a background in child acting and stuff like that, but you've come of age of film in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And I was curious, because June the 14th, 1990, I just think it's a pivotal day in Hollywood. It's the day where on that screen was Dick Tracy, and on that screen was Gremlins 2, The New Batch. And I see style and subversion in your work. And I'm curious, which one would you, if I found you that weekend?
It's so funny that you bring up those two movies, because I have a personal connection to both of them.
Oh, tell.
So when I was a child, I was obsessed with makeup, monster makeup, prosthetics. And I was a student of a legendary guy named Dick Smith, who did The Exorcist, The Godfather. Wrote him a letter, and he would, call me on a Sunday and tell me
about the letter.
So
I can't gloss over that quickly.
Yeah, no, I sent him pictures of my work, and he sent me a letter back saying, "I'll take you on. You're my youngest student ever." And every Sunday he would call me and tell me about, what he thought of my work and criticize my work. But his proteges, Caglione and Drexler, were coming to LA to make a movie called Dick Tracy.
Dick Tracy.
And he said, "Would you like to work on the movie? I'll make an introduction." So I worked on Dick Tracy. I was a mold maker and a sculptor as a young guy. I'm not sure how old I was, 12, 13. I helped make the life cast of Al Pacino. I helped work on, Mumbles.
Do you know when you get movie junket gold, where you ask the left field question of someone and you get what you weren't expecting?
But you haven't yet gotten to the other connection, which is that Gremlins 2 was done by Rick Baker.
Of course.
The first Gremlins was done by Chris Walas, a different guy, but Rick Baker came in and designed all of these Gremlins, with multitude of them. And I was a huge fan. I always wanted to meet him, and he had been a student of Dick Smith as well. And so I was invited by that connection as well to go visit Rick Baker on the set of Gremlins 2. And that man took time out of his day, he must have been incredibly busy, for an hour. He gave me a tour of everything in his creature shop on the Gremlins set. He had invented a system where you would move a person within a sort of almost like an exercise equipment, and the gremlin would move connected to it. Yeah. And so he taught me all about the servos and how he had done his animatronics, and it was a huge leap forward at that time in terms of creature effects. He couldn't have been a kinder person. And so both of those movies have a direct personal connection to me and are part of my history and my interest in filmmaking.
But also, you've not answered the question.
So, I'm sorry.
Which order did you watch them in? I'm
well,
genuinely curious.
I went to Dick Tracy first because I had worked on it and I felt such incredible connection to it. It won the Oscar for makeup.
Of course.
I was so proud of the work that we had done on it and to be a part of that.
And you were 12?
Yeah, he's 12 or 13.
So I interviewed Duncan Jones once, and he talked about being a youngster on the set of Labyrinth.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of the press notes for your film, Fantastic Four: The First Steps, I haven't seen so many press notes that've got dimensions of props and sets in.
Do they?
Yeah, I thought that was quite interesting.
That is interesting.
So the Herbie, it tells me how big it was and how tall it is.
Yeah.
Likewise, the size of the sets that you're building.
Yeah.
But when you've been on a set like Dick Tracy, when you've been on a set like Gremlins 2, where you're seeing people putting in the hard yards to move, does that? I'm presumably that's got to change your head. As a 12-year-old, and the way you tell story.
I grew up, loving practical effects. I grew up making monsters literally in my garage, and working on these movies, and dreamed of a career making monsters until I realized that the industry was changing so much that there was no future really there couldn't be another Rick Baker really, that things were changing, and that it were becoming,
a
CG.
horrible sentence that is, isn't it?
Well, it was, even the guys I worked with, Caglione and Drexler, they split up. One stayed in makeup. John ended up doing Heath Ledger's Joker and a lot of other stuff. And Doug became a big Star Trek production
watch Light
designer.
And Magic?
I did, yeah.
Did you
both
watch
seasons.
the episode at the end of the first season where they see the dinosaur and you see the sadness in people's eyes?
Yes.
Because it's all human stories somewhere, isn't it?
It is. A tectonic shift happened, and we're about to see it happen again with AI and coming in as well.
Oh, don't get me on that.
No, but anyway, to answer your question though, I love tactile things. I think it's really important. Ray Harryhausen going all the way back, like making something that you can put in front of a camera is wonderful. And so I've always believed that, the foreground, the midground should be real, and then you can do something amazing beyond that, and the eye will believe it. In Game of Thrones, we would put a lot of energy and effort into building everything we could in the front, and then you put a dragon behind that, and everyone goes, "Great, I believe it."
Everyone in a geographic area around where Game of Thrones was shot has been an extra and a dead body on Game of Thrones. Everyone seems to have a story.
It's a small town in Belfast. Yeah, right, exactly.
I'm really taken with what was in the letter as a 12-year-old, and because also, I don't know if that happens now. It's just like, would a 12-year-old write an email and then could you reply to it? It just feels like, it's almost like sport, isn't it? The barrier between the people at the very top and the people at the bottom is kind of like huge. Whereas back then, if you took the effort to write a letter.
Yeah. Well, Dick Smith was a very special person, and he made himself available. He published his address in Larchmont, New York, at the back of his monster makeup handbook. And he was a wonderful, generous person. And it was because of him that Rick Baker, who wrote him a letter when he was a kid and got, connected to Dick, who then helped him in his career. And along with other directors, Guillermo del Toro, J.J. Abrams were proteges of Dick Smith as well. There are a lot of people who found him. And I think it's really important to give back, when people reach out to me and they say, "Can I have 10 minutes to chat about being a director or a movie?" I always try to say yes if I can, and I think it's important. Yeah.
There's a lovely story on the original Gremlins, isn't there? And it's in the film where I didn't intend to talk Gremlins, but here we go. Where there's the stop frame shot of all the Gremlins coming forward, and a light bulb just blows halfway through, and it wasn't supposed to blow.
It's just an accident.
It was just an accident, but they couldn't go back and start that sequence again for 2 months.
Right.
And so they just had to leave it in. I just love little stuff like that.
Little stuff like that's amazing. And maybe you're aware that Joe Dante was, working on the RKO lot, and someone came up and gave him Rosebud, and he's selling it this month in an auction. It's unbelievable.
Joe Dante's podcast is far better than mine. I know I shouldn't cross-promote things like that. I'm fascinated. One of my nerdisms is old film magazines.
Sure.
And I collect old film magazines.
Oh, that's amazing.
Primarily because, a lot of the way film is reported now is it's online. It's all variants of the same story. But if you look in the margins of old magazines, it's interesting. And there is a listing actually for Dick Tracy. I noticed this outside, where it talks in the list. So this is films and film. My lesson to you here, Matt Shakman, is never trust a film journalist. Because this front page feature there is on a film from called Moon Over Parador. Yeah. And it's got a huge interview with him. I went to the back of the magazine. It's got a 1-star review. Absolutely slams the film. But there's a bit in here about Dick Tracy talking about a discreet launch of a 12-month production schedule after lengthy post-Ishtar preamble by notorious warrior Warren Beatty. And it talks about that being made in an ecosystem where Batman was happening and Spider-Man was happening. Yeah. And I noticed that you had the reason I wanted to bring that up is I noticed you had an 85-day shoot. And an 85-day shoot, I'm talking to lots of independent filmmakers who can get a longer period of time, ironically, because they've got less money and have to stretch it. Yeah. But when you've got a budget on a film, generally I'm hearing the pressure is to contract that. The days of the 100 Club seem to be in the past.
Right.
but 50, 60, something like that. Was that kind of like a circumstance of just how practical you were going with the film and what you wanted to make?
Yeah, I mean, you always are challenged for time. It's just
Yeah.
the way that it goes, and especially when you're doing something with visual effects, you know, every time you put Ben Grimm on screen, there's extra things required, you know.
You just scrub him out the script after a while.
No,
just think,
no,
I'll
no.
have 2 days off and like cut that scene.
You can't, you know, you can't do it. He's
Yeah.
one of the Fantastic
Of
Four.
course.
He's a central person here. But when you're filming, you know, every shot of Ben Grimm, you have a shot of Eben, the actor, filming
Yeah.
it in his mocap suit, and then he steps aside, and we brought in our photo double for Ben Grimm in a full prosthetic outfit with beautiful costumes that were built so we could film exactly what he would look like in that lighting environment. And then we brought in The Rock, which we had named Jennifer, that we found in the desert outside of Los Angeles. We called her Jenny from The Rock because she looked
Very
exactly
good.
the way we
Like
wanted
it.
her to be, and we filmed her there. And then you film a clean plate, so you have all the information to kind of paint in around. And every time you have a shot like that with a Silver Surfer or with a Galactus
Yeah.
or with anything that has a special visual effect involved, it requires extra time as well. So yeah, you're always racing the clock. You're always, you know, the bigger the movie, the faster everything seems to go.
I've been reading a review of a show you did though, of a play you did called Mysterious Circumstances, which, as I understand it, was a show. I didn't see it, so I
No,
can come to it cold.
yeah, of course.
A stage production. The review I read was talking about how you played with audience perspective
Right.
of what you put on the
Yeah.
on the screen, on the
Yeah.
stage. Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting. I don't know what you did, but for a grumpy reviewer to pull that out as something interesting, I'm just curious. Can you tell me that and
Yeah.
how your theatre work affects when you go onto a soundstage in particular?
I mean, I love theater, and it's you know, in
Yes,
some
I'm
ways,
coming to it
it's-
a bit more, yeah.
And that was a very special project. I worked with a great playwright named Michael Mitnick, and we adapted an article by David Gran in the New Yorker. And David Gran's work has been turned
Postman's
into
David Gran.
Killer of the Flower Moon, and
Yeah.
all of these. You know, he's an amazing writer. But he had written about the death of Richard Lancelyn Green, who was one of the most foremost Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle scholars, who had been found murdered in his apartment, his flat in London, in the manner of a Sherlock Holmes mystery.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in it. It's still a little bit mysterious. Mysterious Circumstances is the
Yeah.
name of the article and the name of the play, about how he succumbed. And so what we did is we created almost like a Tom Stoppard-y version of it, where Sherlock Holmes investigates the murder of his own scholar. And Alan Tudyk, a great actor, played both
Alan
the
Tudyk.
scholar and Holmes. But the movie began with Richard Lancelyn Green's death. Or finding the
play did
body.
that.
The play did.
I was
I'm
gonna
sorry.
say,
The play.
crikey, did you do a movie
Gotta
on it
get
as
my
well?
head.
Amazing.
Yeah. No, the play began, and I did it from the perspective almost as if you were looking like down from the ceiling to the floor. But so we had him mounted like in a rig configured on a carpet with the lamp that had been, you know, attached to the floor. So the perspective really felt like the camera was on the ceiling. The audience was on the ceiling looking towards the stage. And then it kind of receded from view as if you were flying out through the roof. And then it became a kind of video projection moving through London. And so yes, it was using a kind of cinematic device to kind of put you into the environment at the beginning.
I think it was in William Friedkin's memoir. He talked about when he was directing opera, and he came to opera after he'd directed film, and he treated the stage. He decided to close the stage in to give him the dimensions of a screen.
An aspect ratio.
Yeah. I thought that was. I found stuff again. It's small little things. I find really. But
when
I've
I
seen the
was-
perspective you talked about played for comedy. You're playing it for drama.
Yeah. I mean, that had elements of comedy in it, but it was really, it was more of a noir actually in some ways than a noir image. But what you say is interesting because the guy who I really learned filmmaking from and who got me in this business was Ed Zwick, and a great filmmaker.
Coming to that very man.
And he loves theater as well. And one of the things he said to me, he's like, filmmaking is like 1,000 prosceniums. When you're directing for theater, you're staging for one audience member's point of view, and you're moving within that frame using triangles and depth and all of that to create interest visually. But then when you're filming something, obviously, it's different. You now can move the camera to create a different audience perspective, and how you stage for each camera is like how you stage for each audience member, in a theater. And that was a huge sort of way for me to kind of understand how to approach filmmaking, to bring what I knew from the theater into film.
Can I ask you to rank something? Let's go like internet clickbaity just for a second. Can I ask you to rank, say, and it's crudely cutting it down, the three key parts of filmmaking. You're not allowed to say it's a draw, that's a cop-out. Like the pre-production, the shooting, and the edit. if I was to ask you which is your happiest place on all of those, it's just like, where would you put them? I'm not saying you dislike any of them. I'm not going to clip it to try and make it sound like you're summing any of them. I'm just curious which bit of the process is the bit that gets like the electrodes in your brain really
making it, the middle part is probably the most fun, because you're seeing what you've been preparing come to life.
Yeah.
And then there's the old adage, which is nothing is as good as your dailies or as bad as your first cut.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So you're seeing the dailies come in, you're seeing the footage that you're filming that day, you're seeing your stuff come to life, you're impressed by all of your collaborators making it, but you haven't yet had to put it together into 2 hours that has to stand on its own, right?
Yeah.
And then when you get into post, it's that rigorous process of like, oh gosh, I got to kill my babies and I got to move some things around and I've got to answer
as angry
questions.
as you get in post? Just that little movie.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
I like that.
So probably the middle portion, yeah.
The reason I ask is there's a moment in Cut Bank, which is about 70 minutes in, and I don't want to do it for spoilers because for spoiler reasons, I don't want to explicitly say it.
Spoil away.
I can't really, because what if someone I'm really precious on spoilers. What if someone watching it hasn't found this film? Because I couldn't watch all of Fantastic Four, so I went and found Cut Bank this week and had a look at it.
Very, very different, yes.
Yeah, but there's a moment, 75 minutes in, involving a picture. And the bit where that comes together, I just sat and wondered, it's just like, if I'd have made that would have been my eureka moment.
Mm-hmm.
That one specific piece of design that must have been formulated, God knows how far back.
Yes.
Appreciating it's a Blacklist script. I need to, is it Roberto Patino's script?
Yep.
But looking at that, it's just like, that's the bit I'd want to make the most.
That's right. Yes, exactly. That diorama. Yeah, exactly.
And so is it the same kind of principle? When you see that moment come to life, you realise like you've got it.
It's definitely part of that. Yeah. And it's the images that you expect, the images that you've been building towards.
Yeah.
But it's also the things you don't expect. It's the joy of finding new things. It's the joy of you come in with a plan, you come in, ready to execute on something that you've been working on for months preparing, or years preparing in the case of this one. But then you also have to be open to the new idea. You have to be open to what the actors are bringing, what the cinematographer, what the designers are bringing, and all of a sudden you're being excited and surprised by new ideas. And I think the role of the director is to articulate what the story is, to articulate what the tone is, so everybody knows what you're aiming to make and to point in that direction.
Yeah.
Then you start to get all these wonderful ideas that are servicing that spine and that story, right? And you start to get surprised and delighted by all of the things that your art department is bringing, your costume designer is bringing, your property master is bringing. All of these folks are bringing amazing work that then makes what you have been dreaming about even better.
So if I can name check Black Dahlia Theatre in Los Angeles and Geffen Playhouse in Los Angeles. So what's that, 6-7 years of theatre work?
Well, I ran the Geffen for about 6 years,
and then
the Dahlia for over a decade.
So you've got 15, 16 years then. I think that's my maths.
Yeah.
It's my social network moment. There's a bit where Jesse Eisenberg said, I get the same.
18 years,
that's
think,
it.
really, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But because one of the things that struck me about the bits of Fantastic Four that I've seen is there isn't a moment where there's not more, and you've seen the whole film, so you have an advantage on it, but there's more than one actor on screen at any one time.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder about if you're driven towards ensemble, because it's well known you were looking at another blockbuster movie, which I'm not going to go into, but I thought that's interesting. That's also an ensemble driven film. This is ensemble driven.
Yeah.
It's just like, is that the kind of story you're looking to zone in on? It? Is it the idea of working with multiple actors?
I do enjoy it. I love doing plays, which are by nature ensembles. It's great to bring a bunch of talented people together, build a world. There's nothing more fun, especially in the theater where the director steps away after opening night. And now the actors hold together this world that you've built, and you all have to have invested in creating something that has a coherence and an integrity, that the tone and the world, the style, everything is being preserved and feels unified by this company. And I think you have to do it in film as well. We had rehearsal for this, about 3 weeks of rehearsal before we started filming, in order to build that tone and that style together. So we were all on the same page, we're all making the same project. That's incredibly fun, but it is also fun to do, different kinds of stories that are focused on, one or two folks too. Yeah. But yes, I mean, look, I was working on Star Trek before I came over here.
Yeah.
They're similar they're similar stories. One's a found family, one's a real family, but you Reed and Sue are very similar. Spock and Kirk, one's incredibly cerebrally sort of focused, and one is more emotionally focused and more risk taking. But they come together and make a perfect pair. Spock and Kirk and Reed and Sue. Yeah.
So tell us about your glamour life. Tell us about tell us about this rehearsal process.
Yeah.
Because do you go Sidney Lumet? Do you put tape on the floor? Or are you like
Right. No, I mean, Sidney
that?
Lumet's rehearsal process is, obviously a filmmaker's rehearsal process.
Of course, yeah.
Right?
That's why I'm curious.
Yeah,
the difference.
right. And I come at it really as a theater director. So we had rehearsal space set up at Pinewood, 2 wonderful rooms that felt properly old and vintage with wood floors.
Oh, did they have the smell?
Yeah, but
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a good
we
one.
need the smell.
Like a
A
good
good
smell.
one.
A good old musty smell.
This is going to be a scratch and sniff podcast.
Yeah,
now
yeah,
that we'll-
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And we outfitted it with 60s furniture and, made it feel
Okay.
very much like a cozy, comfortable place, put a lot of artwork up around the walls. And then we gathered around in our little 60s living room and read through it and talked about it and analyzed it. The writer, again, much like a playwriting process, Josh Friedman was there the whole time to answer questions and tinker with stuff. And we made discoveries and we talked about things. And then, we got up and staged scenes and played around. We had a bed in there. We had different sort of approximations of scenes. But it was less about locking in something, which I think is maybe more part of Lumet's process in terms of like,
very much
yeah,
part of his process,
very much, being very specific about something. I generally find that you want freedom with stuff. I found when I was doing theater for so long, I do a lot of new play readings, right? We would do new play readings. And if you had just a little bit of rehearsal, it was actually kind of great because everyone felt very fresh and they would make choices and try stuff. But if you did too much rehearsal, it would kind of die. When you would get to that public reading, it would lose all of its freshness and all of its spontaneity. Everyone was in their head thinking about things too much. And so film is definitely an interesting thing. It's a hybrid. Like the more you rehearse something and lock something in and are super precise about it, when you get to that set and you're doing it, it loses its spontaneity and its life. A theater process needs 4 to 6 weeks to fully go through all of these different stages where you get to know something too much and you lock things in too much and then you have to find your way out of it and back to spontaneity and go through the whole tech process and then have opening night and find the play again. You don't have that time in film. So you want to talk about all the things that are under the surface. You want to get to know each other. You want to build these characters, but I don't want to make it so dialed in that they're not able to try a million things when we're filming.
Interesting. So I read an interview donkeys ago that talked about how some directors are scared of actors. That there's again, I wonder if theatre neutralises that a little bit. But I was also really conscious, like, for your feature directorial debut, I was looking at some of the actors you had in that cast, and you had Bruce Dern. Billy Bob Thornton, John Malkovich, people who, with the best will in the world, they might be the loveliest people in the world. If I walked into a room, I'm needing the toilet fairly quickly. I think I can delicately put it that way. But when you're making your feature directorial debut, appreciate it's produced by Ed Vick. I know I did notice that. And those are the actors you're working with. Where were you at that point? Where was your head like day 2 on that?
Just absolutely, in awe of all of these people for sure. They're my heroes, of course. Malkovich, especially, I just absolutely adore him. And he attached that movie.
Con Air's his masterpiece, isn't it?
He's absolutely brilliant and a lovely human, and attached himself to that movie and stuck with it for years as I went around trying to get financing for it.
Yeah, because you had a cast fall apart.
I read. Came together, fell apart, whatever. But he stuck with it, and Billy Bob too. He stuck with it. Like it was, really a lovely group of people. But I think to be a director and to be afraid of actors, you're probably in the wrong job. These actors are magical, wonderful, amazing creatures, and they are your chief, sort of collaborators in making something. Of course, in the theater, that's it. I was a big Peter Brook fan, and the empty space, like all you need is an empty space and an actor, and that's how you create an active theater. That's what theater is. Actors are your medium, and when you get to film, it's much the same way.
But for me to be asking the question, and I'm not suggesting specific to you, but it appears to be a degree of a known thing. And then also the other side of it, there was a lovely chat that Billy Crystal gave about the set of City Slickers, where he talked about working with Jack Palance, and everyone in awe of him on show. That Oscar clip still called. But he talked about how Jack Palance just chewed him out on the first day, went to talk to him at the end of the first day, and what Billy Crystal realised at that point was this really experienced storied actor was as nervous as the rookie.
Yeah.
And that was mind-blowing to me. But presumably, part of your job is personnel management, isn't it? As much as, just understanding those headspaces. And I wonder, to bring it back to those 3 weeks that you spent, how much did you know your actors? at that point?
I got to know them very well over that time. Some of them I had known already.
Of course, yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, you want to figure out how each person works best.
Yeah.
You know, how to help them be as comfortable as they can be, to help them be as prepared as they want to be, to encourage them to be as, interested in taking risks as possible.
Yeah.
And everyone's different. Some people are very, very trained and approach things from a very sort of intellectual, approach. Some people are not trained and they approach it from a more of an instinctual place. And you kind of have to figure out what language works best for having those conversations, of course, and to be able to meet your collaborators where they want to be met, to support. Obviously, I try to create a very supportive set, a very warm and welcoming place, where people feel like they can take risks and they can play. And I am attracted to things that play with tone and style in interesting ways. And that requires experimentation. That requires trying things that may not work and pushing comedy, or then being reminded of dramatic stakes and going towards those. Everyone is a little bit different and everyone requires a slightly different approach. But as long as they feel that they're being valued and seen and being supported, and that you're focused on their work, and watching intently, because I think, yes, everybody, no matter whether they're incredibly experienced veteran or not, wants to know that they're doing well and they're telling the story. And, as the director, you're there to ultimately make sure that that story is being told very, very well.
So on the walk here, I went past 4 buses that had an advert for your film on the side of it, which I'd imagine is a fairly new experience for you that you're saying.
Yeah.
And there is a perception, I think, that kind of, because, I mean, this is like, huge movie, huge July blockbuster movie, and we assume that everyone in it is bulletproof and can manage their head and everything like that. How do you deal with your own insecurities? Because you're a human being as well. Just because your film's on the side of a bus, just because you're directing a huge Marvel movie that, by the sounds of it, you wanted to do for ages. On your darker days, and I just wonder how you find the space for you in the midst of a massive machine.
Oh,
a very blue machine.
A very blue machine. A lovely machine. I mean, listen, it's been 3 years of hard work, trying to bring something to life that I care about. And there definitely have been a lot of long days and a lot of, 24/7 work weeks to try to get it all done and done well. But, Marvel's an incredibly supportive place. It's amazing that these giant movies are made by a relatively small number of people, at Marvel. Obviously, our crew here in the UK was much larger than that and incredibly talented and hardworking. But, I'm buoyed by the folks that I work with, by the support that I get from all of the people who are my collaborators. I'm not in it alone. I'm in it with so many other great storytellers who are helping to make this thing the best it can be.
But say there's an independent filmmaker watching this, an 18, 19-year-old who's got no confidence and just assumes you've got absolutely all of it. I'm not trying to get into the detail of it, but you presumably have like the insecurity and the imposter syndrome as well.
Of course.
Just to put that message out.
Oh my God, of course. Everyone does, Of course, and years ago I used to, I called one of my mentors. I was so nervous about going to be this. Well, I mean, I'm very lucky to have some folks who really helped me along.
Letters.
I wrote some letters, and
if you don't write a letter, you don't get.
Indeed, but there was Dan Attias, who's a wonderful director who directed a lot of the best of television, The Wire and Sopranos and 6 Feet Under and all this stuff. Was someone who I learned a lot from, and I was just sick with nausea before I was shooting an episode of television that began like the next day. And I couldn't understand it because I'd done 20 or 30 episodes. And I was just absolutely terrified about, doing a good job the next day. And I called Dan and he said, I still get that way too. I still get that way before every single episode of television that I direct. And he goes, and you know what? The day you stop feeling that is the day you're a hack. And it's the day you don't care anymore. And I think, and I think that's true. I think if you really invest and you really care about the work that you're doing, you're always afraid that it isn't going to work out. You're always afraid that this one will be the one where you're found out, So that imposter syndrome is definitely there. But I think caring so much that you're nervous is natural and a good thing.
Yeah. So in terms of this one, there's this set. I'm taken with this penthouse set that you bought at Pinewood. Because again, one of the things I was reading in the magazine the other week was the set of, say, The Untouchables. And how the set design of that was such that they just put $20,000 of posh suits that Robert De Niro would never use in one of the cupboards, just because they wanted it that level of authentic,
Oh,
that
wow.
level. Reading about the environment you're trying to create for your family here, and talking about your rehearsal room as well, about the touch points that you're putting in and making it feel like a family home. Can you take me into the creation of that, but the nuance of it? You know,
Yeah.
what are the small little things you're looking for? And is it $20,000 worth of Robert De Niro suits? You can give me that clickbait if you want. That'd be great.
No, I think everything that they built, we used, and everything that they added in there, we saw, but it definitely wanted to feel like a lived-in space.
Yeah.
And we were creating a 60s, but also a retro future 60s environment. So it needed to have both of those elements in it. It's a gorgeous set. Kazra Farhani did an amazing job. His whole team did an incredible job. It's centered around a conversation pit, as many of those things were. It has a wonderful kitchen that was inspired by the House of Tomorrow, the sort of GE House of Tomorrow, this idea of the electric house and what everyone was imagining the future would look like. And
you a Jetsons fan?
Yes, of course. And it had that vibe a little bit of the fantastic kitchen, drawers that would drop down out of the cupboards, and things would rise up and would spin. And it felt really wonderfully, retro future in the best way. But it was a contiguous space. Like you could walk through it. You could go from elevator to living room to kitchen to stairs, all the way upstairs to bedrooms to bathrooms. So it felt like it was, when you were in it, you were in their apartment. And I think it's subtle, but it lends itself to feeling that realism, that practical thing we talked about earlier, that you're actually in this home. And then it's decorated beautifully eventually with lots of baby stuff and, books and magazines and articles. You open up the fridge, it's all beautiful period details. Everything had that, degree of realism to it. So it felt like you were in a time capsule.
I mean, contrast that with Warren Beatty's Dick Tracy set for me then, just kind of bringing it back. Because it's once I'd come out of watching the footage, it's one of the things I wrote down straight away was Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
I just thought it was really interesting, the use of colour and how you use colour to set tone.
Yeah.
Well, tone is like the key to a lot of your work from the outside looking in.
Tone is a key to everything that everyone does, is trying to figure that out. Tone is one of the hardest things, especially if you're trying to do something that plays with different tones. How do you ride the line? How do you pull it together? Dick Tracy, Warren Beatty was definitely trying to do something bold and really embracing the comic book quality of it in terms of the palette is incredible, the production design is incredible, cinematography is amazing, kind of ahead of its time in many ways.
I think so. You can see when you're watching a big film when things are chosen.
Yes.
And not just there. You can see when someone's
Bespoke,
made a choice.
Absolutely. And and he as a filmmaker was very precise about everything.
He's a warrior, according to that magazine.
I'm sure he was. I'm sure he was. And he was definitely very involved in every aspect of it. And I think this movie wanted to honor the comic book origins in a similar way. We wanted to honor the work of Jack Kirby. We wanted to honor Stan Lee. We wanted to honor who these characters were, which is why I put it in the 60s in a way, which is in the point of their origin, the DNA of that decade is very much who they are, the space race, the idealism, the optimism, the Star Trek quality of it, looking to the stars, imagining that you can solve any problem with the right heart, the right mind, the right technology, is who they are. So it has that comic book quality to it. It has that era's specificity to it. But it also wanted to be, we said it's where Kirby meets Kubrick, right? It's the Jack Kirby of it all meeting 2001, meeting the idea of someone like Stanley Kubrick, a futurist, dreaming of what the world was going to look like. And thinking about it with the same level of specificity, if not more, than a Warren Beatty, dreaming, talking to NASA, designing everything perfectly to the point that everyone thought he made the moon landing happen because he knew so much about space. He knew so much about what it would look like and about zero gravity and about, centrifuges and all these things. And so how could we bring that element to it as well? How do we make our 60s in a different universe feel as real as 2001 feels, right? What's the authenticity we could bring to it?
So, you hinted there. Was it your decision to take this to the 60s?
It was definitely a conversation that happened over the time. Yeah, so there are many, many parents of that decision, I think. Yes, but
presumably, as I understand it, the point where you jump on this project rather than the other project is momentum's going with one as much as anything else.
Which is one of the things that's great about Marvel.
You're a space fan as well.
I am.
Is that right?
Yeah, I do love space movies.
So what was the 12-year-old watching? What were the space movies that the 12-year-old was watching?
Oh well, I can't remember what 12-year-old was watching, but in terms of the space movies that I love, Right Stuff, Apollo 13.
great
Interstellar,
film
you know, 2001, you know,
But you go to something like Apollo 13, for
yeah,
instance.
Black Hole.
Black Hole, right. Now we're
Yeah.
talking.
Oh, and the Bruce Dern movie. What's the Bruce Dern movie?
That
was directed by
Trumbull. I kill myself.
Right?
I could do the score for it right now.
Um,
Do you know what? I'm going to break the convention of this because this man behind us, you're coming into my interview now. Remind me what it's called.
Bruce
Silent
Running.
The score to it is amazing as well. And
Love
the
Silent Running.
vegetation in that film is
amazing.
off the chart.
They filmed on like an aircraft carrier and stuff. A lot of robots.
I'm leaving that exact clip into this interview, by the way. What was your name? Sorry.
Phil.
Phil.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Phil. We like you, Phil. We like everyone else.
Yes.
But so we need to get you onto Doctor Who. I think.
Oh.
You should. I mean,
Yeah.
if we've done Star Trek, if we've done we've done. I mean, surely it's just a matter of time that we're.
I'm not a devoted.
I'll send you some DVDs.
No, I know my way around a TARDIS, but I'm definitely not an expert.
Colour's slightly off for a
Yeah,
TARDIS. Just on it. Just on.
Yep.
I, as an audience member, then I say this: I've not watched your film, and I appreciate the answer to this in some way goes back to the comics of Fantastic Four.
Sure.
The challenge, I think, facing people directing films of this stature and this size, when you've got the antagonist is a threat that's going to destroy the world. How do you make me care that the world is going to be destroyed again? Because I care about the Goonies because they're going to lose their house. It's the smallest possible thing, and I appreciate in the comics it goes back to the family. But are you conscious going into something like this that the audience knows that the world isn't going to end or something? How am I going to play with that?
You're right. The audience knows they're going to be fine, right? I mean, that's the nature of a Marvel movie. That's the nature of the Fantastic Four. It's the nature of reading those comics. You kind of know it. But I think the answer lies in, will this marriage be okay?
Yeah.
Will this family stick together? Will they be able to survive? The thematics of the movie, if I boil it down very simply, is like, can we be superheroes and parents?
Yeah.
Should we be superheroes and parents? By the middle of the movie, they're pretty much saying we can't and we shouldn't and we shouldn't have. And by the end of the movie, they're saying, you know what? We have to be. And in fact, we're better superheroes because we are parents.
Such a spoiler.
Right? But but that's it, right?
I get it, yeah.
I mean, that's that idea that we are better together, we are stronger together. I mean, these are the thematics of Star Trek, these are the thematics of the Fantastic Four.
So how small was that script when you came in then? How small were those stakes? Because I bring this up a lot on the podcast, so listeners will be thoroughly bored by it. But the most fascinating stakes, I'm a very boring man. The most fascinating stakes I've seen in a studio movie in the last 10, 15 years was Captain Underpants.
Okay.
Which I really love that film. And what I really love is they've got this great big, the world's in threat. But at heart, will these two kids be split into a different class?
Right.
The state? It couldn't be smaller as a human story.
Right.
How small was the human story when you came on?
So there was no script when I came on, we developed it. And I think anyone who does...
That's exciting.
Anyone who does a film like this or anyone who does a comic book run and wants to, reinvent these characters for that, whatever that new issue is, has to think about it from their own perspective. I think you have to bring your own specific experience to it. And I thought about my marriage. I thought about my daughter. I thought about her birth. I thought about all the parental anxiety I had and the nerves I had and the genetic testing my wife and I did, and then I thought, oh God, well, what if I had cosmic radiation and I had been changed by a cosmic storm? How would I feel about having a child? And would I be concerned about whether it was going to be healthy and all of those things? And then if I were incredibly famous living in a glass building and everyone was looking at me as the symbol of my time, should I have a child and bring them into it? So I wanted to think about it from their perspective. What would a child do to this particular family? Because they reflect all of us. I think that's the power of the Fantastic Four. The reason why they've been such a bold and original idea since they were created is that they are a real family, and they are not a found family like Star Trek, like Avengers, like X-Men. They're a real family dealing with real stuff. And having a child, raising a child is the most mysterious journey into the fantastic any of us can do.
So I'm not looking for Easter eggs like going into other films and stuff like that because other people are exploring those. I'm not even going there. What I'm interested in is, are there one or two tiny little nuances in your film that if someone picked up afterwards, you think, oh, that gladdens my heart? They're just like a small thing in the background that's not an Easter egg, but just a tiny little detail or a little day on set that was just like a real eureka moment.
I mean, it's really hard to say because I feel, having given my heart and soul to this for 3 years, that everything in every set and everything is a bit of that. You know, from Johnny's Coppertone ad, you know, which was
I have seen this.
which
Yeah,
is
that was
something
it.
that I, for some reason, really needed to make happen, to a jiggly Pan Am aspect tower that appears when the Pan Am building is being attacked by Mole Man, that I just really knew needed to happen.
Yeah.
As the tower crashed down,
sentence.
the, you know, thing is waving. There are, you know, whatever. There are all sorts of things in every scene that end up coming from so many conversations and ideas.
So our time is nearly up, so I'm going to fold my High School Musical binder now.
Is that literally what that is?
It is. It's my daughter's High School Musical binder.
Oh my God, my daughter would be very impressed.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's my war on movie snobbery.
Yeah.
I can't be doing with movie snobbery.
No,
So it's just like, I'll have
fair
a High
enough.
School Musical binder.
Good.
That's fine. If I go back to that 12-year-old who's on the set of Dick Tracy, who's writing letters, who gets to see Gremlins 2 being made, it's the human being story that interests me. If I could get my DeLorean, go all the way back,
Yeah.
and tell that 12-year-old that you're directing a multi-zillion-dollar blockbuster movie that's coming out in July, based on something that you absolutely adored reading and contributing and writing to the comics of, can you just try and capture the humanity of that?
No, I mean, you're absolutely. This is the unbelievable joy of the opportunity to do this. It's an honor. It's exciting. It's thrilling. And for all of the stresses, like you were asking about, you know, you have to be reminded constantly, and I am, that this is a real pinch me opportunity. It's amazing. I used to dress up like superheroes pretty much exclusively as a kid, you know, when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, and now I get to do it for a living. It's pretty amazing.
Because I know it's the artifice of a press junkie, but we're still two human beings at
Sure.
heart, just talking about it. And
Yeah.
that 12-year-old on the set,
Yeah.
quite something.
Yes.
We're out of time, so most of all, a huge thanks to Phil in the corner. The absolute hero, Matt Shakman.
Yeah.
This has been an absolute delight. Thank you.
Thank you very
Congratulations.
much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. A
care.
pleasure.